Hello everyone, welcome to our channel. Today we have with us Advocate N.S. Nappinai, and many of you, if you have seen about or heard about online harassment, she is not a new name. Probably you'd already know about her, but I would like to take this opportunity to introduce her briefly. She is a Supreme Court advocate and she is also the founder of Cyber Sathi. She's been practicing since 1991. She's been focusing on litigation and policy work, but she has also been doing her social responsibility related engagements, which are for training judges, to police, armed forces, students, and people in the industry as well. She's currently an amicus curiae before the Supreme Court in a matter. The matter's name is Prajwala, and we will ask ma'am to talk more about it as we go along. Over there, she is assisting the Supreme Court. So amicus curiae really means someone who's a friend of the court. And the court in that matter is looking at artificial intelligence enabled solutions to root out the uploading of content against women and children. So it's a very interesting matter, and we'd love to hear more from ma'am about it. She's also an advisor to the Maharashtra Cyber Police, and she's a senior panel advocate on Central and Western Railways, Government of India also. She's represented Government of Kerala in a matter quite recently. She has also presented in Lok Sabha Parliamentary Standing Committee on Women Empowerment. She's presented before the National Cyber Security Center, which is also a part of the Prime Minister's office. So her work is varied and experience is absolutely amazing, and I think we'll have a lot to learn from her. She's also a writer. And she writes articles across, and they've been published by various newspapers and national and international publications. She has also authored a book which is called The Technology Laws Decoded. And I'm assuming that that's a little bit on the simpler side because it says decoded, so we can hear a little bit from her about the book as well. And now in 2020, there's another book coming out which is on cyber safety. So I think with that, I think that's a nutshell of the work that she's been doing. And ma'am, I'd like to hand it over to you now. I think just to start off with, and give the audience also an understanding. Um, could you tell us about the Prajwala, the matter, and what your role is there?
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Shivangi, and thank you for having me here for this interview. So yes, so in a way, the Prajwala matter was a huge turning point on many issues. This is a matter which initially started as a suo motu criminal writ petition in 2015. So I was appointed as amicus in this matter in February 2017. The issue before the court at that time was, to begin with, they had received a complaint about rape and gang rape videos of women being uploaded, actual rape and gang rape being uploaded online. And despite first the victims writing in, and thereafter this is an NGO. Prajwala is the name of an NGO which is based in Hyderabad. Despite Prajwala writing in, the content had not been taken down. Therefore, the organization attached two videos along with a letter and had sent it to the Supreme Court Chief Justice, and the Chief Justice of India had converted it to a suo motu criminal writ petition. That's how it had started. But by the time I was involved as amicus, the scope of engagement in the matter was expanded to include blocking of content, child sexual abuse content also. So what I had proposed was the use of artificial intelligence tools for rooting out such content even at the stage of upload. Now, when you know what the content is, and for instance, in copyright related contents, this is a system that is already being followed. So for copyright, the copyright holder already knows what is the content which is belonging to them. So they will be able to provide the content, and hash values are created of that, and therefore deploying the hash value, they can block such content from even being uploaded as any other dissemination other than by the owner is considered a violation of copyright. So my argument was, if you can do it for copyright, why not for criminal? But the issue here will be that unlike in copyright content, where it is known content, here it will be unknown content. So you have to use very, it's not like a simplistic AI tool. You'll have to evolve something a lot more complex, which will use multiple parameters for doing what is called as active filtration, as opposed to passive filtration. So for that, the Supreme Court then appointed a government committee. Then everything was a consensual process. So the one good thing that happened with this matter was there was no sensationalization. And because of that, everybody worked hand in hand for the common good, which is for protection of women and children. So we all knew what we were working for. We were not really interested in making unnecessary, we didn't want to give it undue news coverage, etc., where it was only with respect to evolving consensus proposals. Ultimately, the government committee filed its report. I was part of the committee, of course, and most of the content hosting platforms, search engines, everybody were also part of this committee. And so many changes, it was so evolutionary in that sense, happened because of this committee, and in a very quiet manner. Just to give you an example, even simple things like changes to your WhatsApp architecture happened out of discussions in the committee. Changes to the way you can report online in terms of abusive content happened because of this committee. So if you see Facebook or YouTube, etc., before the committee report and after the committee report, you'll actually be able to see how much more easier it is for you to file specific reports of sexually abusive content. Then the most important evolutionary process that happened was, one, these content hosting platforms agreed to evolve this kind of AI, which was what I had suggested to begin with. And all these consensus proposals were captured as an order of the Supreme Court in October 2017. So a lot of time has evolved or passed since then. A lot has happened in online domains from then to now. So for instance, if you look at what I'm talking about as active filtration of those days, where the submissions were that these are constructs which have to be evolved still. And if you look at what we have today, you will realize that these kind of active filtration tools are already being utilized to root out things like fake news and hate speech. One could still argue that the content is possibly still of known content, but even that known content is being created as a bank using trusted flaggers. So these are all concepts which we had, we were evolutionary in terms of what we were talking about and discussing 3 years back, and which have become the norm today. What remains is for these kind of tools to be deployed for protecting the rights of victim in a preemptive manner.
Okay. So I think, as you rightly mentioned that in this matter, a lot of changes were made to the right from the WhatsApp architecture to also how one reports, abuses online. So I think that brings me to a very important question that today, all of us, we use technology in some way or the other. So then while we are doing that, of course, it enables us to connect with people, but does it also then make it easier for us to kind of engage in communications which may not be considered as normal or as maybe considered as inappropriate or as unwelcome from people? And does it also facilitate some sort of crimes?
Definitely. Any technology brings with it huge, humongous benefits. But with these benefits, you are bound to get all the negative or the rotten eggs also. Nothing comes without a price. So in fact, if you Google this article of mine, of course, that article spoke specifically with respect to offenses against women in online spaces. We can always come to that later. But in terms of the general increase in terms of crimes on online spaces, what you you were talking about. So one important aspect which I missed mentioning when I was talking about the Prajvala matter was we were conscious of the most important thing that online spaces have brought to us, which is freedom of speech and expression. See the ease with which we can reach out to people today. You know, from small things like, so you look like a millennial. So I actually balance the two worlds, you know, of not even a little bit of technology to write home about and, you know, phenomenal connectivity of today. So when we were talking about this evolutionary process in India also, you'll see that, you know, we had very limited access. We had very limited utilization capabilities. And from there, we have now evolved to such complete reliance on technology, which we have particularly witnessed during COVID times. So when we are talking about this evolutionary process, the one thing that will definitely come to mind is free speech. The ease with which every single person can use this domain to showcase themselves, to express themselves freely, and reach out to a much wider audience. So be it connecting with friends or colleagues or being in touch or to be able to do webinars or sessions, etc. In every stage, technology helps us. But these are the same connectivities which will be used or misused or abused by criminals also. So one kind of criminal act which you will see a lot of is a premeditated crime in terms of the financial crimes, etc. But there are also the other kind, which I think particularly given your area of work in terms of sexual harassment, etc., we see too much of that online. Women and children automatically become softer targets. I will not say men are not victims. They are equally victims too. The impact which an online harassment case can have on a woman or child seems to be much higher than that of men. Two aspects on that. One is when a crime is committed. Two, even when a crime is threatened.
I think that's very helpful, ma'am. I was wondering if you could also, let us know why do you think that, there is a little bit of this difference in the sense that when, abuses could be hurled against anyone irrespective of their gender. But when it comes to women or girls, does it take a different kind of a tone or tenor also?
Absolutely. In fact, unfortunately, from the earliest time till now, what I keep seeing is that invariably all kinds of online harassment seems to focus immediately on sexual innuendo. So that is why women and children become much more susceptible or they are softer targets. So I'll give some examples just to, make my point. One of the earliest cases that I've come across was of an activist, writer, speaker, etc. So she was giving an online chat session. Okay. Now this user signs in with the hashtag rapist. I think that should have given the platform an indication enough to block the user, but they don't do that. So progressively during the chat session, this user starts abusing the activist, the lady activist. Obviously, the person speaking was a lady. It reaches this situation where from general sexual innuendo to threats, it comes to rape, gang rape, videographing and then uploading of such gang rape, etc. So it is only at that stage of extreme offensive harassment that the platform then blocked the user. So you would think that these are rare instances of a very depraved mind. From then, I'm talking about early 2000 till date, if you look at the trends in terms of online harassment, you will see this has been the standard modus across the world. It's not just India, it's not just a particular jurisdiction. So in fact, the article I was referring to earlier with respect to women's freedom and unfreedom online. And I consciously use the word unfreedom instead of no freedom or lack of freedom or whatever, because we assume that we have a lot of freedom online. You know, when we are in our physical worlds, we are all women who have grown up being told about what to wear, what not to wear, where to go, where not to go, when to go out, when not to go out, etc. Irrespective of what somebody will tell us, we will also exercise caution. You know, in the name of freedom, we are not going to risk physical harm. So we will not venture into a dark alley. We will not venture into a place which is desolate, nobody is around, and where you don't feel safe. There are no street lights. So we believe that crowds give us security, right? So things like that. These have become part of our DNA. But the minute it came to online spaces, you're physically distanced from this digital screen. So you assume that you're a lot safer. And so you also become a bit more bold. So you don't get scared to venture beyond the norm. You don't act very prudish and you don't say, oh, I will only go to these sites. I will only look at these things, etc. You want to experiment. And here is your opportunity to experiment, because you also believe that you're anonymous online. And then you venture forward, and it comes as such a shock when you realize that you are actually more vulnerable online than you are offline. And when somebody violates you, even if it is in cyberspace, it harms you as much, if not more, than even in the physical space. So for instance, when we were talking about Prajwala, when I was doing the research on that, I actually came across that case first when I was writing my book. And I am a criminal lawyer, okay, to begin with. I started practice as a criminal lawyer. So to me, it was shocking when I first came across this case that, you know, people will actually upload evidence of their own crime online. And I was wondering, how can it be? It cannot be. And then I went and did a little bit more reading, and I realized these kind of videos are not being uploaded in the dark net or in inaccessible spaces of the internet. They are actually on social media platforms which you and I use every day. So for instance, I found many of these videos on YouTube, where I've given each and every link in my book in terms of what I could find, with explicit captions saying Lajpat Nagar woman gang raped by 7 people, etc. So on one hand was the shock of such kind of videos having been allowed to be uploaded and continued, where in one instance, for instance, I remember 6.5 lakh views had already happened before the video was blocked. That's 650,000 people more have violated that victim apart from those 7 people. So these are all very scary instances. So when you look at this kind of harassment, when you look at the kind of reach that the online domain can have, and you realize then how dangerous it can be and how powerful a tool it is therefore in the hands of the criminal. And therefore, when you look at cases, you know, and look at what we have seen in the recent times, I will take a very simple example also. We are talking extreme. So people may think that the impact is very high only when we are talking about horrific crimes like rape and gang rape, etc. You may have already heard me speak about this in many of my sessions, but this is something very poignant, you know. It really brings the narrative home of June 1st, 2020. The school academic year started then. And the schools were trying to reach out to children to ensure continuation of their education in terms of providing videographed sessions from teachers. Now, the teachers are not actors. They are also going out of their way to ensure that they can deliver qualitative education to you. It's not the same thing for them as being in a closed classroom where they're not going to be evaluated. They have a particular system of teaching you. They can do what they want in there, and they're not going to be judged for each and every action, etc. Despite all this, they have put themselves out there, and they done their recording and this is being circulated to the children. Even when classrooms happen, it is a fact that children will go out, male or female, they will go outside, make comments, maybe even, nasty comments or nice comments, whatever. It's a part of a student life. But the difference happens when people take the comments online. Because the minute you take it online, then the impact is not within four walls. The impact is across the world. So see the kind of difference that will happen. You were asking, why should it be different in terms of gender, right? Just think of the same situation of a male teacher who is being ragged online or trolled online or bullied online, whatever name you want to put to it, depending on the kind of action that is being taken. Whichever way it goes, including even sexual innuendo, it won't affect the male teacher as much as it does the female teacher. Because the minute it is done to a female teacher, she is answerable to her family, to her friends, to her colleagues, as if she has committed a wrong. So this whole stigma we attach to the victim instead of the perpetrator firstly has to change. But that's not going to change overnight. So until such change happens, what will happen is the woman will get victimized more. A school may just decide, okay, why should we risk it? Let's just use male teachers. Then you are, because of a very childish prank, or you thought it was a childish prank, or maybe you meant something worse, you were trying to be malicious in your actions. It doesn't matter why sexual innuendo-laced comments are made of a blue sari teacher. And that's what happened on day one, when Kerala schools started, and they had these videos and there were trolls all over about a blue sari teacher. Is this something that is permissible? Do those children realize that these are actually crimes under various enactments and they can actually be prosecuted for that? You're, after all, a school kid. If you're going to be prosecuted today for cyberbullying or cyber stalking or various other offenses online, your entire life, which was otherwise ahead of you, is gone. So remember, everybody should remember that if they are going to make these kind of comments in online spaces, they are not, it's not a kind of safe domain for criminals to do what they want and get away with it. So that's why I was mentioning about the uploading of rape and gang rape videos, etc. also. Be it those rapists, be it that person with the hashtag rapist handle, or be it these children who trolled their teacher. They can be traced, they can be tracked, and they can be prosecuted. So I think it is important that criminals also understand what is the law with respect to bullying or stalking and ensure that they do not commit these kind of crimes.